Hi guys, good morning. Today we are going to talk about dependency injection in Angular and use cases of services, and we'll see what are different type of uses for services, what we use it in actual coding. So let's go. Alright, so to understand dependency injection, we have to go a little bit in basic things, and then we'll go into dependency injections. As you can see on the screen, we have our node project setup, and we are not going to use that much HTML, so let's just simply remove it. This is generated from normal and ng command. So let's first create a file which we'll use for dependency injection. So before we go for dependency injection, let's talk about classes and objects. So what is a class, right? So let's create a file, TS file. In TS file, we will write classes. In Angular, we generally write classes in TS file. So yeah, let's create example dot a example a dot ts. Okay. So when we write something, right, in Angular, a class which we want to use in another file. If you're going to use classes in another file, you should start with export. That's a format. It's something similar to public in Java. When you write public, then you can access all your packages in Java, where you can access things out inside package, which your Java file you are in. So in this case, you have to write export, then class, and then whatever name you want to give that class. So in this case, we'll just say example A. Now you must be thinking like, why you are going so basic? We'll quickly come to that. So this is a example A, and we have, let's consider another file called as new file example b.ts, right? And then we'll simply save it, export class example b, right? So we have two classes right now, example A and example B. Now if we want to use, let's define a function also, public test A, and then we'll say console.log hide from A, right? And same thing we will do for example B, just changing the names there so that it doesn't create any confusion. So we have test B hide from B. Okay, now these are classes, example A and example B, right? We have example A on the side, example B on the side. These are classes. These are blueprints which we have not yet used somewhere. How do we use it? Consider if I want to use example B inside example A, then I have to basically write something like private if you want to declare it inside private member, and then say instance, this is just a variable name, instance of example B, and then we can write new example B. As you can see, two things happened here. Automatically we imported example B class from a file which is located at same location, that's why single dot and slash, and then the file name was example B. You don't need to TS file. Angular, this Visual Studio Code and Angular understands that this example B is of TS file, so you do not need to write ts.ts here. So you can just write it dot slash and the file name without extension. And inside from that file we have imported an example B class, right? Now we did import example B class. When we say class, it's a blueprint. We did import blueprint of example B, but that blueprint hasn't been converted into, you can say, an analogy of blueprints to buildings. So example B right now on the top is a blueprint which you imported, and then you are saying new example B, when you're saying new along with another blueprint, it creates, you can think about as a building, a instance. Now this thing, until now it was just kind of in a file system, if you think about it in that way. Now it has gone to RAM and CPU. I mean, this guy, now you can use this guy. So if I say something like constructor, and we can say simply like this dot instance of example b dot test b, right? And for at least using it somewhere, we'll just create, we'll do same thing here also. So we'll say private instance of a, let me just increase the font size for you guys, instance of a, and then new example a. So this would go ahead and work as per our requirement. Let me just open terminal and start our project. Just a second. Port, this thing is already in use. I think we are running something here. So let's simply stop this and close this. Sorry. So let's start now. No. Let's try to run it again. This time it will say it's okay. So this error will come up when basically you have some kind of instance already running in your computer. You will get this kind of pop-up in Angular 12. Basically, this is much more user friendly. Anyway, so why we are going into some basic things? This is more for a fresher or beginner kind of guy who doesn't understand that much how classes and instances are. If you want, you can skip to another chapter to know more details about dependency injection. Alright, so we have our project now. Let's just bring up Chrome, right? And let's just open localhost. There is nothing we wanted to print, we just want to see on console. So you can see high from B is called. How high from B is called? Basically, our app component was started through Angular bootup. Then inside that we had created an instance of A. While creating instance of A, when you write this format, the prototype or basically the blueprint name pre-bounded by a new keyword, and then basically constructor parameters. Right now we don't have any parameters inside this, that's why this is blank. Otherwise this would have some. If we write something like a string, then this will throw an error, as you can see. Now you require to pass here basically something inside this, right? We don't want to go that much in details about constructors, but that's how it works. So example A was called, in constructor we used instance of B to work, and that's how we printed. So coming to what is dependency. So example A, right, this blueprint, this class, I use class for now, right? This class is dependent on class B to work to function correctly, because right now we can say it is not necessity because the example which we are giving doesn't show it, but many cases consider if you have a class which logs. Let's create that, right? So we'll create a class called logger.ts, and we will just create export class logger, and then in constructor I'll just giving you a quick example of private class type, class name, okay, and then we'll simply use basically this is class name is a string. You can, I think, write class name directly, it will declare it throughout its Angular feature. We can use this later. So if we write just a single method public log, and there we can take arguments. So which can be of any type. We can simply say console.log this dot class name comma args. We'll go into detail about the spread operator later, but yeah, if we do something like this, now you can think about it that if I am having something called as logger, just a new logger. It is of some use because here you can say that something is log from example A. Let's remove this test class method. In constructor, I'll simply use this dot logger dot log, and then we want to say custom example A constructor was on, right? And then simply save it. Now you can see that so example A, okay, so let's do one thing in logger to make it more informative. We will just add inverted commas and this thing in space so that this makes more sense. So now you can see any log we create from any of the class where we have instantiated logger, we get in a kind of format. This is a kind of format, right? Example A, if you want to have format with class name, method name, you can have that format. If you want to put timestamp, you can do that through logger. So logger you can use for a lot of things. Now, I think I can prove my point here that in example A, if you are going to use logger, logger is a dependency for class example A. You will require logger instance to be created in for class A. This is what dependency is called. If a class is creating an instance of another class in itself, the other class is a dependency of this current class. I hope I'm making it clear. If you have any questions, you can ask me in comments. Alright, so now we come to point of dependency injection. What is dependency injection? Consider if there was some way where you don't require to basically create a class. You're thinking, what? So let's think about it. So you are writing here new logger, right? And you are basically creating an instance of logger in your class. So everywhere you have to use logger. If you're going to use logger, you have to create an instance of it. And that doesn't make any sense in this case, right? Because you might have hundreds of classes and every time you have to create a dependency there. What if I want to use same instance of logger? So let's write custom here. And I want to use same instance of logger from class A, it's example A, and in example B. What if I want to use same thing? So I have to basically create two copies of this class. If you think about it, as I said, this is created in RAM. So in RAM or CPU, now there are two copies of logger. One for class example A, one for example B. Which, if you think about it, this dot logger is really not needed. You can have one copy of it and then utilize it all across. Alright, how do I do so? So in Angular, there is really easy way to do it. You just write inject table, right? And voila, this class instance is now managed by Angular. So if you have a constructor here in app component, you can simply write private and then example A, just variable name, example A, and then you have to write the blueprint name of this class. That's it. Now app component has example A's instance, and all our calls will be done now from Angular. Let's save it and see. Okay, so null example. So there is no provider for example A. This kind of error means that Angular doesn't know, you have not, basically you have created injectable for example A, but you have not told Angular that where it should create the instance and how it should manage dependency injection for. What do I mean by that? There are multiple ways to register it in Angular. One way is there is a providers array inside ng module. So if you have a set of components where you want to use a service, you can add it in providers array. So we can write here example A, and through this now there will be a provider, and you can see custom from IB, custom from I, example A constructor was called and everything started getting called. We didn't create new and bracket thing here, just I'm repeating that to be clear here. We just wrote this thing in constructor and it automatically, as we wrote in example B, right? If you think, if you write something in constructor here, you would have to basically pass a variable. But in app component constructor, we didn't write anything. We just simply wrote the variable name and the class name, and it automatically object instance came in here. Now, same thing we can do for B. I can write here at the of injectable. Let's convert all of these to injectables, and we can write logger also as an injectable, right? At the rate of injectable. And if we use in app module, I think we will get an error. Let's see if we can show that error and use to solve this. Logger, right? And instead of now creating instance of instead of creating instances of these things, now we can simply use private and then instance. Okay, just copy its name. Instance of example B as example B, and then logger private logger as logger, right? I think we should get an error because logger has a dependency where it is saying inject decorator to specify injection token. Well, I will go into that. You can ignore for now. In logger, let's just remove this class name and we will just have log done here. I'll go into details of that one later. And then we are still using an example B. So let's just close all files. So we go to example B, and obviously we don't need to write this anymore. We just write constructor and private and example, logger, and then logger file. That's it. Let's save, and everything works as it was working before. So what is happening behind the scenes here? First thing is you are using logger in example A and example B. Then you are using example B in example A. So let's keep all the file on the side. So one second. So you have example B using logger. Then example A is using example B and logger. Sorry. Angular, as you written injectable, and you have provided these injectables, or these this injectable thing is what is called services in Angular. A single instance will be generally created for them, and you can use it. These files which you have declared as injectable can be used in services, like one service, as example B, you have declared as an injectable, this became a service. Now you can use this service inside another service also, or you can use directly a service inside a component. And generally try to avoid, consider if you have used example B in example A, and then you go ahead and in constructor you write this thing, what will happen? If you write example B, you have written in example A, and in example B you import and you write example A. Let's see what will happen. So this is a circular thing which I am trying to do. Example B is used in example A, and then I am going to use example A in example B. Circular dependency. We are just trying to reproduce that. What happens when we do it? Example A and example A. So you save it, try to run it. You will be getting an error here. Circular dependency in DI injected in an example A. So now you try to basically do a circular dependency where B is using A is using B. So try to avoid those kind of things. You should have in your mind how services are getting used. You should have a tree where you can have multiple services on top and they are using common services below. So it should be like downward graph or kind of tree. Let's remove this example. And I'll quickly go over now how do we basically use services. Okay, there is one more thing. In Angular, there is another place where you can basically declare where you want to use your service in. So if you write provided in and then give a path, what options do we have here? Let's first place control and space, and then there is platform, root or any. Generally, if you write root here, that means you want this service to be accessible in whole application, in complete application. If you write provided in this place, you don't need to write example B anymore in providers array. You don't need to maintain providers from providers array anymore. So if you save it, you will see that still everything is working fine. And there is one more way. In component, I think you have something called as providers. And in this place also you can simply write example A. Consider if I write example A here and I remove from here, then also this would work. Crazy. So there are three ways where you can do dependency injection in Angular. One is by using normal injectable and using providers of a module. Second is using normal injectable and using a providers array in component. Third way is basically in injectable you are mentioning that you are going to use this service throughout root, like throughout application. There are other options, we'll go into detail in some other calls. For at least beginners and freshers, it is expected just to know this information. Now, what do we use in dependency injection for? Right? One example I have given you. It's of using for logs, or you want to do different kind of logging. You have written custom logging infrastructure. Now, second, there is, by the way, there are much to, if I would have written a parameter in constructor, there is a way to instantiate it. We'll go into calls in detailed session, advanced session. But for now, what are the use cases? You can say to someone in interview, what are the use cases for using services? One of the use case is when you want to make HTTP calls, you generally like to have a service there, where your components will be calling methods in service. Like this is a service right now. Just think about a class. Don't get scared hearing about service. So you can have call to server, something like this, and then you can call. And in service, obviously, you can inject other services. So you can write private HTTP, which is a service provided by Angular HTTP client. So it's not shown, but it is present. So if you can use, if you want, you can use HTTP client and then from, and then at that Angular HTTP, Angular common slash HTTP. So you can use now HTTP client here to get this.http.get call. If you want to make, you can make a get call, or if you want to make a post call, you can make post calls. These things you can do through this class, and using it in a service, you can why do we would want to use HTTP in a service? At very basic level, this is maybe not very correct. You can use interceptor for this, but in this class, you can write a private method. Just a very, this is just not practical use case. I would say there is something called as injector to do this, but if you want, you can write add headers to HTTP and make get call. So I know the name is long, but instead of calling this guy, you can basically simply say this.http.get, and then inside this you can add headers, and in headers you can add my custom, and then you can write the. So headers can be read from server, and you can pass some token or some secret information which you want. That this information is visible, but you can pass an encrypted token to identify the user ID, or you can do a lot of things in there, and that is what is done in generally authentication in servers. And instead of calling http.get, you can just say add headers and make a get call. That's it. So you can use a common method here to do some special operations over HTTP before sending it to server. Now, second use case of service is for data sharing between components. So you can have a service like we have example B, right? And in example B, we can have something as call component. We can fire an event here. Fire event, and then we can use subjects, public subject, subject. Subject will go through in detail, and I think I have gone through in some detail in some other videos also. We don't want to send any information. We can simply say this dot sub dot next, and if we generate basically new component ngGC, that is ng generate component child, and then that component will be generated, and inside child we can import example B, and in ng unit we can basically subscribe to this dot example B dot sub dot subscribe, and you can write console dot log event received from component A, and then inside component A we can basically have this child and child declared here. This app child is the name of selector, that's why we are declaring it. This is basically parent, our app component, and we are declaring this child inside, and then we are going to just on initialization or basically button click, that will be much clearer. So we'll have a button and click me, and or the better name is send information to child to B, and then we can simply have a click handler can simply copy this, use this here, set info, and we can say example B here, right? Example B, example B. Since we are using example B as a place where you can call a method and then subscribe to it, that's why you are using example B. Example B dot fire event. That's it. So if you save it all, I think we should be able to get this. So null injector, basically HTTP client. So we are using HTTP client in our class, but HTTP client is provided as a part of module from Angular. We have to just write HTTP client module, and I think that should be enough. So now if you clear the log and you click here, alright, so we are not receiving event. Let's see what is going on. So we are subscribed, we want to log here. In HTML we have written send info. One second. Send info, control C, and then that component we have written send info, then example file event we have done. Okay, so we missed basically a bracket here. So simply let's now see. So if you click here, event, okay, so spelling was mistake. So spelling was wrong. So event was received from A. So as soon as you keep on clicking, we will keep on receiving events from A, right? So this is the second kind of use of services where you inject it in different components. From one component, you can call a method in service, as we called this method fire event, and then in another service you can subscribe to a subject, basically, which you will call dot next on. I know this is a little bit advanced. I think we have gone through some videos. Please, if you have not gone through, go through my videos, and if you find them useful, do remember to like and subscribe to my channel for more. These two are very basic usages. One more is about data sharing. This was like a whiteboard service where a component comes and writes something, and then this information is thrown as an event to another component. Another kind of service use you can think about is like a service where you store information for other components to simply use. There is example also, but I think that will be too much for this video. So I guess this video helps you in understanding what is dependency injection and practically what it is used for. If you have any questions or any suggestions, please feel free to write in the comment section. Thank you. That's me, Gourav, now logging out.